Welcome to the Good Fit Careers podcast, where we explore perspectives on work that fits. I'm Ryan Dickerson, your host. Today's guest is Chad Connally, a senior conversation designer with Amazon's Alexa team. Chad, thank you for being here.
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing great. I wanted to bring you on because I find your work truly fascinating. You've done everything from product management with IBM and the Weather Company through conversation architecture and conversation design with Google and Amazon. I would love to learn more about your perspective. Would you tell us a little bit about what you were like as a kid, what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Sure. I always say when kind of you get the pre-roll of my career, it's a nice way of saying that I'm old now. Which I always tell people too. It's a good way of saying the opposite of that is worse. If you're not old, something bad happened along the way.
Right. Lucky to make it here.
Right. I think as a kid, I feel like I was a weird kid, but a very well-adjusted weird. I was a gay kid and grew up in West Texas. And somehow I was also well parented for that reality. Was sort of raised to think that I was no better or no worse than anyone else, but also very aware that I was different than everyone else just by the fact of waking up every day. And I think somewhere along that journey, I just learned to embrace that difference and kind of lean into it and do what I do and do what I wanted to do, which is still true to this day. I was and am an avid reader. That's a thing that was true then and is true now. I don't know if I have one story where I was I wanted to be an astronaut or I wanted to be a doctor.
Sure.
I think maybe there was a period where I wanted to be an artist, but history became my favorite subject, was my college major. But coming out of school in 1999, technology was blowing up and sort of took jobs in that space and never looked back.
Sure. So what did you study when you were thinking about your education, college and whatnot? How did that transition to that first, full-time job after school?
I think I was fortunate with timing, at least as far into the late 90s. Consulting firms would still hire full, classes of 50, 70, hundreds of new grads. And you would graduate having gone to school and go back to school for consulting school.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Teach you how to actually do the job.
For us, sometimes a summer before you actually start working. I think mine was I started the training program in June and didn't start client work until September. I think having a liberal arts background and just kind of knowing how to learn really stood me well in that space. But so I think that prepared me well. I think I was surprised that the technical things weren't as challenging as I thought they would be.
What do you mean?
I was such a we were learning how to write SQL queries, for example. And I thought, I thought it was code at the time.
Sure.
Hardcore code, little did I know. But I thought, that's going to be really hard. And it turned out it wasn't that hard for me. It was just as simple as learning syntax and kind of not a vocabulary, but learning a grammatical structure almost.
Yeah, a little more intuitive than you may have thought.
Yeah. And then having familiarity with language and learning how, to read and to process and structure language. I was was able to figure it out pretty easily.
Right. SQL. Got it. Right.
Some things that I thought would be easy were hard, and some things that I thought would be hard were easier than I thought. So
you started out in consulting. Where did it go from there? When did you feel like you started to hit your stride?
Late.
Yeah, sure.
Late bloomer, as I think from earlier previous conversations. So it took me a long time. So that was 99, 2000, somewhere around. Oh gosh, this want to date things President Obama's first election. I got a job in advertising as a program project manager, and helped manage the redesign of USPS.com was the big project in that space. Not to go into too many details, but stayed in kind of the advertising, digital program, product management, really up until 2016, 17. And by then I had made my way to IBM, was in product management roles. And by then had kind of grown disillusioned, not disillusioned with tech, but just kind of, program project management. I just was wanted to do something that was a little more challenging, a little bit richer. By then I was turning 40 as well, or about to turn 40. Somehow I inherited the voice and conversational AI products. And I remember my manager at the time asking me, like, hey, start figuring out what kind of resources you need. And so I started reading, talking to people. I started learning about this conversation design thing. And when I started digging into it a little bit more, I thought, I think with the amalgamation of like skills and experiences I have personally and professionally, I think maybe I could do this. I also knew I wasn't going to get a person. So I self-nominated and had to kind of do like a hyphenate thing and be the conversation designer and product manager for an Alexa skill for the Weather Channel. But I did it. And that was kind of the aha moment. But it didn't happen until I was 40 or so.
Remind us the story here. IBM acquired the weather company. That was one of the predominant kind of weather apps out there. Alexa was really just emerging. Large language models weren't really a thing that anybody talked about outside of the research world. How did you get into a position where you were building the first Alexa skills, and how did you design some of those first interactions?
Conceptually, I don't think I obsessed too much over the tech. I had good enough technical partners that I didn't need to understand like all of the under the hood stuff. I needed to understand kind of the basics of intent discovery, intent detection, how to define kind of basic system logic, and then how to kind of write prompts. And that's kind of how I describe the profession in general, or at least the profession as it was kind of pre-LLMs, is to kind of put it in 3 pillars, which is language. What are the things people say? Logic, what are the ways that a system needs to handle things people say, kind of the, mediating logic between 2 parties in a conversation. And then prompting, what are the things the agent needs to say back, right? So kind of got to handle all those 3 elements and was able to figure out the rest by trial and error. Had a really, one of the better teams I think I've been on across my professional career at that place.
When you're thinking about intent, you mentioned intent detection. Was this something that you had to code out at this point? Would the models recognize what people intended?
In legacy and LU systems, you absolutely define that. So there are different ways to do it. It has often been like human identified. So you'll have, you'll have teams of labelers who look through essentially a spreadsheet and say rows 3, 7, and 17 mean the same thing. Different rows mean different things. So essentially you kind of create these like bucketings of meaning, and then you point each of these buckets become intents. You point each intent toward a different path of logic so that they're handled differently. I don't know if that may be hard to process like orally. It's usually a little easier with like a visual.
Well, I mean, I think I get it. So it sounds like if you've got, a few hundred examples of Alexa, tell me how to do this, or tell me what the weather is like, and you have different people say it in different ways, you'll tag or label or categorize those things and say, hey, look, just spit out the weather, right? Tell us what the temperature is or what the forecast is going to be.
You'll wind up with things that line up to just something that's like, give me a general weather report. You'll have another lane that means like, tell me about a general weather report, but focus on precipitation. Like, will it rain? Mm-hmm. You may have another one that's precipitation, but that's about snow. You may have like pollen, allergy focused. So just kind of, so sometimes you'll go from like that kind of like very specific down to some nuances. But yeah, you're generally like grouping things kind of around like topically, subtopically, and in a weather case.
And weather data itself is so complex. There's so much depth to it. Did you think that in 2016, 2017, that voice interaction was going to be how humans interact with computers in the future? Was this the vision that you saw?
I think even then I thought I had been around long enough to every time a new hype cycle comes along, the new thing is the one everyone says is going to upend the others. And the reality is always that the new gets added to the existing mix. And it's just the proportion of things, the range of things we can do just expands. So for me, voice just becomes another voice, or let's just say conversational inputs, because, as you can text with agents now and Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and others, conversational inputs are just another means of interacting with bots. So I think it just gives another level of convenience and lets us all kind of do what we need to do the way we need to do it whenever we need to do it.
Sure. Just another layer of complexity. That makes a lot of sense.
Or another layer of convenience, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah. Sure. So you were in product management. You were one of the kind of emerging conversation design folk at IBM and the weather company. Was there anything that you really struggled to master or to become proficient at to be good at your job at that point?
Patience? Is that a weird thing to say?
No. Yeah. Elaborate.
I saw the potential of the technology like very clearly. Like for like weather use cases, gosh, I wanted to put like AR layers on cameras. Like,
oh, sure.
Show me the tornado and like, is it coming toward my house or is it somewhere else? And then just learning that's really far away for lots of reasons. So I would say that patience in one sense of just like the potential versus like what are kind of the incremental steps to get there, which maybe is like an inventor or designer's dilemma. Sometimes it's just that's the reality. That's unfortunately the reality. But I think like where I certainly got better over time is just depth of technical understanding. So that's maybe where I was started with frustration, but that's also where over the course of moving Google, from IBM to Google to Amazon, is just the level of technical understanding has grown exponentially.
So from there, you eventually landed at Google. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
So caveat, I was a TVC, or I never remember what the acronym means, but I was a contractor on a huge program there, Contact Center AI, CCAI, servicing large telecommunication clients. I wound up managing a pretty large team of conversation designers, data labelers, data scientists, data engineers, and QA analysts. I think by the end, it was 65 people. It was very, very big, which coming to Amazon, I have no people. And I think I prefer having fewer rather than
a little bit of help.
Having fewer rather than that many. I like to know people's names and know what's going on with them. But the experience there was very good, just in terms of, Google is Google, and you kind of see like what the best, what among the best of the best, like what is kind of going on in the industry. So just kind of lessons in like scale and organization.
At that stage, in terms of what sort of interactions at a high level you were thinking about, were there specific things that you were excited about being able to build? Were perhaps there things that you were limited by technology-wise, or whatever you can safely talk about? I'd love to get a little bit more insight into how one would actually begin to help such a large kind of population of people, that the people who would be calling into call centers, that kind of thing.
It really is an interesting proposition, coming from weather and even some of the time prior to that in the advertising space. I mentioned USPS. I had done work for Nike. I had done work for Audi of America, Hershey, Nickelodeon. I had done a lot of like consumer product stuff. So kind of being in you could say like contact centers don't seem as exciting maybe. But if you think about the amount of time a person spends on hold with customer service or in the middle of like customer service transaction, if you actually can make that easier with technology somehow, it provides a lot of value to whomever is having to resolve a problem with a bill or a question they're having about a product. So kind of being able to just reframe what seems like a more mundane problem in a positive way. I think maybe being closer to some of the data operations. It's a little bit like, I guess people have used the term dog fooding for a long time. I didn't have to do data labeling myself, but I had to supervise it in some instances. So I had to kind of help the team craft standards in terms of how we were going to review huge volumes of transcripts, like how we were going to define Like we were talking about intents earlier, how we were going to define categories of meaning and really get down to like a really granular level of detail that I think was beneficial. So you kind of learn that like a company like a Google, like an Amazon, like even an IBM are as great as they are because of the mastery of the most minute details.
It's all in the nuance, I guess. Can you tell us a little bit about what conversation design is today and kind of how you see that function or that profession?
I think we're at a point of inflection or profound change. It's definitely something that we all talk about as peers, even as we go about, kind of our day-to-day jobs. I don't know of any unemployed conversation designers. I don't get those calls like, hey, I got laid off. I'm looking for something. Can you help? That doesn't happen. It seems like we're at, as far as I can tell, pretty close to, I don't have the stats, but I would guess like full-ish employment, let's say. So everybody's busy, let's say, but the AI revolution of 2023, as I think it will be remembered, I don't think it was of 2023. I think 2023 was the Bastille moment, was the first. And I think, we will be one of the many professions changed by the AI revolution in ways that I think even we don't totally understand yet. So I think it's hard to say because I think it's changing in real time.
So what's the job like today? What would be a day or a week in the life, or however you want to describe the function that it has evolved into?
I think I can say this, and it's not just true. It's true, would be true beyond Amazon, which is everybody still has things they have to deliver. Like I said, look, I don't know anyone who isn't employed. So everyone is still ostensibly doing project work, strategic or tactical. People are still trying to reap the benefits of NLU-based systems in contact centers and all kinds of functions. Mm-hmm. Generative AI, LLMs are mature enough for some things, not mature enough for others. So I think today it's not too different from what it was a year ago, 2 years ago. Where it might be differing are for individuals who work at companies that are heavily invested in either developing or deploying generative AI, large language models. That's where I think you would start to see more disruption.
So let's just pretend that I'm lucky enough to join your team and I'm a total newbie at conversation design. Would you walk me through perhaps how to, or teach me how to design an interaction like you would in your normal day-to-day?
Well, the first question I have to ask you, Ryan, is, are you a control freak or are you not a control freak?
I would lean on the less control freak side of things, I think.
Then this is a good time for you because this is not a time to be a control freak as a designer.
Tell me more.
Because the AI should be able to do a lot of this for you. Where the rubber really hits the road is in how smart the AI is and how much it learns how to do by itself. And this is sort of out there in YouTube videos and this, that, and the other. So if the AI has picked up sufficient data patterns, references the right conversations, right types of conversations, then we don't have that much to do because it should have seen examples of conversations and be able to detect the pattern and kind of do it itself.
To get a little bit more detail, when we're thinking about a project that you would have to deliver on, is there a way that you would think about structuring what am I trying to accomplish in building this interaction or architecting this sort of conversation? Is there a framework that you use to think through the AI should learn how to do this gracefully on its own?
You're kind of going back to kind of the basics of UI, UX design and customer empathy and thinking about and understanding their intentions and their goals. What are their need states and what tasks are they trying to perform? And then from there, it's going to be language based. So how are they going to conversationally accomplish that task? And what tools are needed, if any, by either the AI or the person to accomplish those? And then how do you do the integration?
When you're thinking about, broadly, conversational AI, image, video, the like, what's your view on the space, the industry, or the technology as it stands?
It feels a little bit like the 90s. Like it's kind of like a tool explosion. I mean, like there was, pets.com, cats.com, dogs.com, like a website for this, a website for that. There's an AI for this, an AI for that. One that can record your face, one that can record your voice. Like, it will be kind of interesting to see like where the dust settles and kind of who's left standing a few years from now. Maybe everybody, but, maybe not too. Where is the real utility and where is novelty?
So what do you think? Where is the real utility?
Honestly, I think that there's just so much information in the world and in our personal lives that anything we can use as a tool to process and summarize is going to feel like a win.
How interesting. Do you think we're there? Like, do you think that's going to be a 2024 thing or perhaps closer to 2030?
I don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, me neither. It's going to be fascinating to see how it goes. I would love to be able to, at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, have some sort of large language model, AI, GPT, whatever it be, just get me up to speed on all the news that I would find interesting. I mean, that'd be exciting. Switching gears a little bit, tell me a little bit about how you approach hiring.
Well, in my current role, I don't hire. I don't currently manage people. So, but how I have hired in the past is, I think I look for aptitude, attitude, and appetite. And appetite, I would say, could be drive or curiosity, or maybe a little bit of mixture of both. Yeah, obviously, like every role has like some skill requirements. You need to make sure the bases are covered or that the person can get there quickly. But ultimately, I'm looking for somebody who can grow with, and especially like in a field that changes so much, I'm looking for somebody who can grow with and push the boundaries of the job and push me.
What do you mean by that?
Like push me to, like, if I'm the leader of the team, push me to stay ahead of them or get out of their way. Like if that's what has to happen, like seriously,
sure.
I wouldn't stand in someone's way.
So let's just say we've got somebody who's, excited about the concept of conversation design. They see the opportunity there. Is there anything that you'd recommend that they become proficient at or learn on their own before they would kind of toss their hat in the ring and say that I want to be a conversation designer?
I would say there are I've noticed like three major patterns. There are people like me who did a job switch somewhere along the way who are maybe already seasoned professionals and for whom it was a natural transition at some point in their careers. There are people who started in some form of conversation design, and they usually went through a company like Nuance or 24/7 that did more like traditional IVR services, and then transitioned into Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri as those started coming online. And then the third category, which I would say are more of the like juniors, came through some form of like data labeling role.
Interesting. So those little tiny details that you were saying that Google and these other large companies have mastered, it seems like the pipeline for new candidates is to come through and understand those little tiny kind of kernel level building blocks.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say even that as like an established career path. I would say it's people have still had to kind of self-direct, acquire skills, network to get there. But those are kind of the three patterns I think I've observed, like across all the places that I've worked and people that I've come to know in the space.
Interesting. So in either of your last couple of roles, when you've been very much so focused on conversation design and conversation architecture, what have your hiring processes been like? What was it like for you to interview with these groups?
I mean, these big companies have such defined recruiting processes. Like it is what it is. You can't do much more than just try to be prepared and ultimately be yourself and try and represent yourself well.
We'll get back to the conversation shortly, but I wanted to tell you about how I can help you find your fit. I offer one-on-one career coaching services for experienced professionals who are preparing to find and land their next role. If you're a director, vice president, or a C-suite executive, and you're ready to explore new opportunities, please go to goodfitcareers.com to apply for a free consultation. I also occasionally send a newsletter which includes stories from professionals who have found their fit, strategies and insights that might be helpful in your job search, and content that I found particularly useful or interesting. If you'd like to learn more, check out goodfitcareers.com and follow me on LinkedIn. Now, back to the conversation. If someone's going to be jumping into this field, if they're going to commit to saying, I want to be a conversation designer, should they, theoretically be prepared to build a conversation or to write some prompts or is this a whiteboarding sort of activity? Or, how do you think about being able to just kick the tires?
I would say expect to have to do a test task of some kind. So some kind of project. Having done several of these, how bad do you want it? This is me being me. I am extra. I want to look buttoned up. I want to look like a professional. So I spend time on them. I don't spend like 40 hours on them, but I don't throw something together in 2 hours and walk in the door at Google and say, here you go. Like, it's got to be good enough for Google to want to put their name on it and show it to one of their clients. Like, think about it like that. That's how I would advise to think about it.
And what is your perspective on good enough? Like, let's say that you're moving into a new interview process, or you're building one of these processes to hire for your team in the future. And you put together an example task that you want someone to work their way through, design an interaction, design a conversation. Is there a way that they can understand through your perspective what good enough looks like, and when to say, okay, I've spent however many hours on this, I can make peace with this and submit this and move forward?
I don't think it's a defensive posture or a defend your life. I don't know if I said, when I said that before, if I was saying it too strong. I was trying to get across the way I pursue it, which is this is me. That was me talking to myself. You need to be ready. I would underline, think about it. If one of these huge companies, they're going to put their brand logo on it, it's got to be that good, or they've got to see that it could be that good if get powered by all the resources they're going to be able to put on it. So it's got to kind of convey that trajectory. I think what it is it's got to convey a point of view, and you've got to be able to articulate what customer or business problem you're solving, maybe what design problem you're solving. Sometimes that's interesting too.
What do you mean by design problem? What does that mean in this context?
Trying to see if I can think of one it's kind of hard to think of one in the abstract, because a customer problem would be I want to pay my phone bill. And the conversation is, I want to pay my phone bill.
What if we took our conversation today? So we're going to talk for 45 minutes or so. If I wanted to be able to say, hey, can you help me extract the questions that were asked and then help me build just kind of a story arc, a narrative to say, here's where we started, here was the peak of the show, and here's where we closed. How would you think about architecting that conversation?
It's a little harder because we've met prior to talking today.
Sure.
So we kind of knew what we were going to talk about, but it's a little more open-ended. What conversation design, it generally is some form of a service interaction. For a bank, it's pay the balance on your credit card or pay your credit card bill. I don't know if you can do this yet on them, but I'm going on a vacation, order currency for my trip to Europe.
Sure.
So I have cash when I get there. Those kinds of transactional tasks that, they would have to pay a human representative of some kind or pay for a retail location for you to do. Not only do you not have to call a 1-800 number or use an app, you can talk to a robot and get it done.
So imagine maybe we're like an insurance company. This is an example actually from one of the people that I'm working with right now. They built the chatbot, or they're implementing this off-the-shelf chatbot. And one of the things that it kept getting stuck on was people would engage with the chatbot and ask, what's my deductible? And instead of actually going into their file and being able to say that your deductible is $100, it would come back with the definition of a deductible. And it would drive everybody nuts who was actually trying to figure out, what is my deductible? How do you think about, debugging that conversation or refining that?
On the surface of it, it's either a training data problem or a software problem, depending on what tool they're using. Because NLU-based systems are very boxes and lines. Imagine you're
and that's natural language understanding. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Your legacy, I guess, will soon be legacy. So imagine a boxes and lines flow. like a Visio Flow, or there are a bunch of those tools. So somebody asks, what's a deductible? That's a arrow from there to a point in the flow. That point in the flow needs to know, or should know, to go to the back end and look for variable deductible and get $100 and bring it back. So that when you as a conversation designer are writing the answer, you're writing a sentence that essentially is your deductible is blank. And when it's rendered by the IVR, it reads, your deductible is $100 because it got 100 back from the back end.
Anything else you want to share in terms of the mastery of the art of conversation architecture and conversation design before we move on?
Conversation design is something that we all do all day, all the time. Imagine going to like your favorite coffee shop. You talk to the person at the cash register. Like, that's a conversation design. Like, how to have that conversation. The person at the cash register knows how to have a conversation design. That conversation has been designed by like the social construct of the place you're in, the activity you're performing. So we're either like actors in or participating in conversations that are designed for us all the time. We just don't perceive them that way. As a discipline in technology, it's new, but as a form of attaining goods and services, let's say, been around for millennia.
Sure. As long as language has interacted or has been a thing. If I can pry just a little bit more, we, the humans, are trained by that same social contract that you were describing. We've, mastered these interactions. We've had a few of our own awkward interactions, I'm sure, get up to order a cup of coffee and totally, fail terribly. Are there things that machines or the models that we're talking about now just like don't get it, or seem to just have a really hard time understanding the social norm of, hey, I'd like a cup of coffee. Okay, that'll be $1, right? Like, is there anything that they just fail on?
I mean, if they're more like legacy systems, again, ones that are built not on emerging technologies. When you get to like extra hot, no whip, all these customizations, it gets down to like how well designed and coded is it to handle potential variation on something as personal as a coffee order.
So when you're thinking about the kind of making the complicated art of conversation design a little bit more simple, a little bit more common sense, what are your thoughts?
It's interesting because, I kind of joke around with people that like we always make it like way harder the way we like contort ourselves into pretzels to ask like a virtual assistant, like, what time is it? We overthink it. We do it with people too. Whereas like, I kind of suspect that even if we are like Regina Georging it towards some other person, like we actually are pretty forgiving toward one another. With like chatbots or any kind of virtual assistant, like I know from like some research we did, or I was a part of like a long time ago, like when I first started doing conversation design, like we noticed this like behavior of like, we called it like keywording. So this is like 2017, something like that, like way like where people like yell at it. They're like they're talking to someone who doesn't speak English.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so because they're not sure if they're being understood, like again, they're contorting themselves to these like patterns or whatever. But like, I wonder, like when they have like chatbots that are, or any kind of virtual system that's more fluent or more fluid, like how will people kind of natively talk, especially like in voice? I think chat or typing is completely its own thing. And I'm sure the open AIs of the world and people who have been, GA with those kind of products have data, but I'm really interested in how people will speak. I think speech is a really interesting.
Sure. Especially when, like, I think about, I don't know, I feel like the mom analogy is an easy one. When I think about my mom interacting with Siri or Alexa, there's like all these like errors in translation. She gets so frustrated, and sometimes she'll, try to make it so simple or try to overly manipulate what she's saying or asking that it makes it very hard for the bot on the other side to actually get it. I'm also so curious, once we feel that level of trust or confidence that like, okay, it's going to get it, whether I'm speaking quickly or slowly, or I'm being, obtuse, or if I'm doing a good job of very specifically describing what I need. I'm really curious if we're going to get more comfortable and laid back, if we're going to start to use more advanced like prompting techniques in the way that we speak naturally. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my mom also keywords, but I think she's just like late. I don't want to say lazy. My mom is not lazy, but my mom is like, well, just trying to say the fewest words possible because she's watching Lifetime and whatever else. She's just like the timer 10 minutes. Like she's retired. She's living her best life. I don't know. Like I don't know how because I know like the prompting that I do is like I do like in my own time. I do mostly like image prompting these days. I'm in an AI art class with this professor from the Maine College of Art that a friend of mine hooked me up with. So I'm doing a lot of that. So a lot of like, I'm not going to, like, I think like a mid-journey prompt, like I'm never going to say dash dash V 6.0 dash dash S, like whatever you have to say there. I don't know like how much like verbal prompting I think will always have to be pretty simple just because you're never going to be able to speak the syntax of a complex prompt.
Do you think any of these models are going to get like personality, a little bit of sass, a little bit of like, come on, bro, like just tell me what you want?
ChatGPT has custom instructions that you can play with. I told mine to like give it a little bit of zhuzh to make it a little bit like more, trying to make it sound a little bit more like me, honestly.
Sure. I don't even know how to spell zhuzh.
I didn't either. It took me like a week to figure it out. Nice. I finally did. I don't know how I did it, but I was like, oh. And then I sent those instructions to a friend who wanted to, so I just screenshotted like where it was. And my friend was like, I never knew how to spell that word. And I was like, I didn't either. Yeah, but you can do that. And I suggest for anybody who wants to see what agents are like with personality, go to ChatGPT if you have an account and play with that feature. I don't know like how good it is. Like I more or less like told it you can be a little bit funny, but don't be like too much. And I told it to give me deep cuts on certain like topics where I think I already, like if I ask it about, like I read a lot. So if I ask about books, like, can you give me like, I'm like, I already know that. Like, give me the deep cuts. Skip to the deep cuts. For a while, I said the shortest possible version of an answer because they were really long. But then it got to like where every answer was 7 words long. And I was like, okay, like.
You mentioned you were in an AI art class. What is that like?
It's super fun. It's like my personal learning and development. A friend of mine, colleague, took a class with this guy at the Maine College of Art and then told me about it and was trying to do something on her own afterward. And I asked, like, can I do that too? So we get together like once every couple of weeks, go over industry trends. I spend spare time trying to make things, and I kind of will find, I guess I treat it like you would treat like kind of like a user research testing project. Like I'll find like a thread. So like one week I worked on like Narcissus pictures. Like, I don't know if everyone knows that story, but Narcissus was the figure in Greek mythology who looked into a river, thought he was so beautiful, fell in love with himself, and turned into a flower. And the reason I picked that story is because, like, in terms of a painting, it's always a dude looking into a pond. It always looks the same. Like, and then you can play with all the variables around that to see all the different things that Midjourney or DALL-E 3 will do to produce different kinds of painting. So I do a lot of stuff like that, and then I put it in like a Notion doc and then share out what I've learned. Prompting technique.
What have you learned about prompting when it comes to images, not just conversation?
Personally, I always try to get these services to break their own content policies.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. How would you even begin to patch those kind of holes? Let's say you were on that team. Let's say you're at Midjourney or wherever it is. How do you start to combat against?
In an art space, I don't think I would. So, well, who's the user for it was DALL-E 3 that I used. Who's the user? If you think it's like a graphic artist at some company, then that's to me is on the company to set their policy. You're making, let's say it's like Airbnb or something, like you're making like pictures for people to hang in the homes they're Airbnb. Like you want to set a policy that is those are going to be like whatever they need to be. If you're opening that tool for artists, it needs to be like whatever artists need to use to create. I don't think there should be a policy. I think that we need to, as a society or as a legal framework, like put some consequences on misuse of AI output. It should cost you if you put a deep fake out that causes somebody harm.
Sure. Oh yeah. And I mean, I think about the Snapchat filters of the future here, where it's like, look, this is my style. Let's say that I'm, an iconic artist, right? Like, how do you even begin to say, oh, this is actually me? This is my art, my style, versus I'm stealing from someone else.
I don't know. Picasso said but I don't know the quote exactly. All great artists steal.
To a certain degree, and that same concept of like, I'm a writer, I read a book, I read these classic, pieces of art or these, classic literature. How would it not influence your own training data and influence a little bit about what you put out there?
It always does. I mean, I have done some creative writing. I'm theoretically writing a novel right now. Say theoretically because I have an idea.
Is Chadbot writing the novel?
I wish Chadbot could be writing it for me while we're talking right now, actually.
Right.
If I knew
how to work on that conversation.
If I were up to date on my other goal for the year, which was to learn Python, maybe that would be happening.
I feel like ChatGPT is so good at Python. Like, do you think that you're really like gonna need to learn how to Python effectively?
It's early enough days that I feel like all of these tech, because like I said, I was saying, this is all like the stuff I do in my free time as I sit here at my computer and play with all the other toys that are out there. It's like with this art stuff, like I feel like the reason my output is good is because I do know a little bit about art and art history. Like I know how to prompt it, but I feel like anybody can still get something that they'll like. But for somebody like me, I'm going for like a little more like precision. So, knowledge helps. I don't know. Like I feel like
the general awareness.
Yeah, I feel like maybe have the computer science background to know how to set up like the environments and like how to execute code and like what all the like code pieces I would, like what kind of like how many scripts, like what scripts would I need? And I feel like maybe even just the foundation, we'll see how it goes with foundations. Maybe if I got through like foundations 1, 2, and 3, then after that I could start having some AI do some of it for me. I had a friend who became my friend because I took a lot of creative writing workshops with her. She was my professor, teacher. But one of the things she suggested was like, sometimes it's fun to like put your writing into Google Translates and like translate it to Japanese and then to Irish and then to, do all these transformations with it and see what comes out. Sometimes like garble it up and see what it comes out as. And like, I feel like there's like ChatGPT and others are just like tools like that to really kind of like play with your own creative output and see what you can get. I mean, a piece of prose doesn't have to be what it's always, we have the tools now to really reinvent these art forms. It could be totally different.
Interesting. Is there like an art project or a prompt or I don't know, like in terms of the class that you're taking right now or an idea you have for the creative output from the class? Is there like a project that you could suggest to anybody out there who might be, playing around with DALL-E 3 or Midjourney or whatever it is?
I feel like Midjourney 6 to me, I feel like they're onto something. It seems to have higher fidelity to the text. Like one of the things that I've been really interested in, again, because I start with writing and then images are like newer to me, is also for like Instagram, sometimes when I started first, because I'm old, I started Instagram like when I was 37 or whatever. Like, oh, and then a friend told me like, if you're ever going to publish anything, you need to have a presence because so I post things in the odd chance that I ever publish something and need to promote things. But I was like, I read, and like, how exciting is that to like look at? Like, oh, here's a book. Like,
Sure,
but I was
sure.
like, but I was like, it would be cool, and I've always wanted to do this. Is like I could take like a passage and like illustrate it, and by hand, that's really tedious. But if I could say, here, Dolly 3 Midjourney, here's a passage I liked, imagify it. I did it last night when my husband and I went to see a 4K restoration of the film Alien.
Ooh, I bet that was awesome.
It was awesome, but I gave it the. Have you seen the thing on social media where people say Alien is a? I'll see if I can get it right. Alien is a film where no one listens to the smart woman. Then they all die.
Classic story.
The smart woman, except the smart woman. The smart woman gets away with her cat, and it gave me this is Midjourney 6. It gave me a woman in kind of a olive jacket with dark brown curly hair. She looked like she was like 12, which I had a problem with. Scorny, not quite Scorny Weaver, but close, and a cat. And the word alien on it. It was basically the film poster. I was like, oh, there we are.
So if anybody wants to join Chad's team, pick your favorite passage out of literature, write the prompt for Dali, and we'll try to get you an interview.
Yeah, I like bonkers and crazy, and I think all of this should be fun. We should feel a little like mad scientists and enjoy it, because this is the time to do it before it's, gets really professionalized. I don't think we're there yet, and I think it'll be a while. So have fun.
All right. So thinking about if we're going to give any advice or share any insights for folks who, might be aspiring in the field, or perhaps even going back and giving advice to your younger self, what do you think? What would you share?
I don't know, because like, I feel like I found the right thing professionally, at least like in the places and spaces that I was. I don't know if it existed until I found it. So on one level, I don't know. But on the other, I would say like, don't take chances willy-nilly. Like, I think the way that I tell my story sometimes that, I kind of, because I like to joke around a little bit, I tell it like, I kind of like did this and then I tried this. I didn't take any of those like those changes of course lightly. I thought about them. You and I worked together through some of those transitions.
Oh yeah.
But I wasn't afraid of them. I just thought about them before I did it. And, thought I was going to put my name, my reputation, not my entire career, because I had skills and could do other things. I wasn't afraid of failing, but I thought about it before I did it. But I have a niece is she 19 or she's either 19 or about to turn 19, freshman in college. And I told her, I was like, I wish the thing that they were teaching y'all in some kind of like life skills course is you will get laid off at some point. Like probably. Oh, yeah. Probability is that will happen to you. I was like, it happened to me. It's not fun. It sucks. You will recover. But like I had a career counselor, or they gave us career counseling, and I met with this woman, and she was like, really like sat down with me and helped me like think about like how to look at, because I was telling her, I was like, I want to stretch in roles. And sometimes I'm like nervous about applying to things if I don't 100% fulfill the job requirements. And she was like, well, you don't have to. She's like, if you're close, apply. And she's like, and sometimes you can determine like what skills you need to either acquire or how to like talk around or actually like think about ways that you do have those skills. So she showed me like a way to like go like, it's kind of old school, but to break down a job rec and put it in a table and kind of in a corollary column, kind of map out like your experiences, their skills that map to those and see which ones are blank. And that's your kind of go gets or, things to think about. I kind of do that more mentally. I think it's time consuming to do like that kind of table approach and do that much writing. But yeah, so that I'm that deliberate in every choice that I make, but I'm not going to not take a risk because technology changes, the times change. I love the quote from Martha Stewart in her recent masterclass commercial, which is when you're through changing, you're through. I think I'm adopting that as a personal mantra.
Change is a good constant. If somebody were to try to join your team, if I have the aptitude, the attitude, and the appetite, but I don't want to just throw that in the summary there, is there anything that is a good clue or an indicator for you when reviewing before actually meeting the person?
Well, I think one thing you'll see, because we talked about the test task, that will tell you a lot. Well, that will feed into kind of the interview process, depending on. So for those roles at Google, the interview process was sometimes those were 30 minutes, sometimes longer. So it'd be part of it's a presentation, part of it is Q&A. So you could tell a lot by the person's thought process, how they think, what they know, what they don't know, by just how they present things and how they address the questions that are put to them. And then after that, you're putting them through one-on-one or panel interviews. I think you get a lot from the test task. And then in the one-on-one, you can really dive into skills and you can really see how far off are they. And if it's something that is, have they ever labeled before? No. Do they know how to read? Yes. Okay, then they can probably figure that out. Did they know Dialogflow CX? Oh, wait, product wasn't publicly available when we were staffing people. So did they know another conversation design tool? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Switch in here to bring this to a close. When you're thinking about the future here, next couple of years, maybe the next decade, what are you excited about?
Retirement. Just kidding. I'm not that close.
Come on, Chad.
I'm not that close. I honestly have no idea where this goes. I really don't. I mean, somebody cracks AGI tomorrow and, who knows? Yeah. I guess specific to my field, and I guess generally what I would say is advice would be is a bit what I said earlier. Don't fear change, embrace evolution, learn from an Amazon leadership principle, learn and be curious. Always try and learn new things. Even sometimes learning a small things. You don't have to acquire a third language, second language, learn how to program. Just small things sometimes keep you fresher. That's all you really need to do. I would say also don't fear automation on the face of it. My hope for automation is that maybe there's a future where I don't have to do things that I just don't like to do.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Personally, professionally, all of the above. Chadbot does all of that for me.
Chadbot.
And I do the things that are higher value, connecting with friends, family, colleagues, more strategic work. I think that's certainly a possibility. I think taste, editing, curation, all becomes more important. I think there may be some nuance in terms of specialization. I don't totally know what that means, but I just think I kind of see some slicing and dicing even of existing specializations. So specific to my field, I think everyone who understands AI systems, how they work, how to mediate interactions between humans and computers using language will 1,000,000% have jobs. We may even have higher value and more important jobs. Will we be called conversation designers? I don't know.
I mean, conversation design didn't even exist 10 years ago, right?
Or it did in very specific niches nuance
Sure.
and 24/7, where people were designing, call flows for customer service.
Any other thoughts, reflections, inspiration, things you'd want to share with anybody listening?
I should preface this with, I haven't read the book, but I'm familiar with the concept. The Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow. That may not be the title. I would say cultivate your second level thinking, your slow thinking, your deep thinking. I don't know if other people do this, but I sometimes have a fear that people do, which is like we work however many hours we work a day. Then we like close our work laptops, open our personal laptops or phones, and then are reading like technical articles or industry happenings, and you never give your brain a chance to process. And I think that processing is critical. So I would say like take up some hobby that occupies like your hand, like another sense, like your hands or your eyes. Like I took up digital drawing during the pandemic, and I find that I feel like I'm much more creative and thoughtful because I do something for an hour or two here and there that just puts me in a different zone. I mean, some people meditate and they can do that. Some people get that with exercise. That's cool. But something like that gives you a little break, gives you a chance to think on it, kind of like I said, just process whatever's happening in your mind, work or not work, on a different way.
Well, Chad, thank you for coming on today. It was really great to chat with you. I appreciate it.
Great as always.
Our next episode is with Nate Bush, product manager at Dell Technologies.
You can't excel at the role without really being passionate about what you're building and who you're building it for.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe for new episodes, leave a review, and tell a friend. Good Fit Careers is hosted by me, Ryan Dickerson, and is produced and edited by Mellow Vox Productions. Marketing is by Story Angled, and our theme music is by Surftronica, with additional music from Andrew Esperanceta. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our guests for sharing their time, stories, and perspectives with us. And finally, thank you to all of our listeners. If you have any recommendations on future guests, questions, or comments, please send us an email at hello@goodfitcareers.com.